Sansa had never known quiet like this. The cold wind cut through her cloak as she rode, her fingers numb from gripping the reins. Behind her, the capital still burned in her memories, the bells, the cries, the stench of rot and roses mixed into one haunting scent. King's Landing had become a prison, and now, by the grace of the gods, or by the cunning of her unexpected husband, she was free. Almost. Tyrion had said little as they rode. He was tired, more tired than she had ever seen him. The clever, silver-tongued imp of the court had vanished somewhere between the planning and the escape. What remained was a man who knew his own life had ended the day he chose to save hers. Sansa hadn't wanted to trust him, not truly, but he'd asked for nothing. No touch, no loyalty, no favors, just freedom for her. He could have taken the easier path and left her behind, let her rot in that golden cage Cersei had so carefully built. But he didn't. The plan was desperate. Varys had whispered it late into the night, drawing paths on parchment with shaking fingers. "North," he had said. "You'll need allies, real ones. Go far, go quiet. If you reach the Dreadfort, Lord Bolton might offer protection. Though I do not say this lightly." Varys had looked Tyrion dead in the eye then. Pray the sun is not there. But neither of them had expected Roose Bolton to be waiting on the King's Road. He arrived with only 5 men, silent, grim men with pale eyes and sharper blades. Roose himself looked like a man carved from cold stone. He spoke little, his voice flat and precise, like the sound of snow crunching under boots. He wore his leech-black cloak over a pale grey tunic, and when he saw Sansa, he merely bowed his head once. "We heard you'd fled," Roose had said. "The roads are not safe. Come north. You'll have shelter at the Dreadfort. You are a Stark, after all." Tyrion had looked at him long and hard. "And why would the Warden of the North help fugitives of the Crown?" Roose didn't smile. "Because winter is coming, and I prefer to choose my debts before the snow falls." Sansa, still trembling, had glanced at Tyrion. He hadn't answered, but he didn't protest either. Now, days later, the Dreadfort loomed ahead, tall and bleak against the grey sky. Its towers clawed upward like broken fingers. Ravens circled overhead. The land smelled of wet stone and something else, something iron and old. Blood, maybe. Sansa felt sick. Roose led them inside personally, his voice quiet as he gave orders to servants. "Give Lady Sansa the East Wing. The imp shall have the tower rooms." He didn't call her Lady Lannister. That small courtesy didn't feel like kindness. It felt like calculation. That night Sansa sat by the fire in her chamber, trying to stop her hands from shaking. Her dress was still stained from the road, her shoes soaked. Her hair, once brushed and perfumed by a dozen maids, was now knotted and wild. Tyrion entered without knocking. "You shouldn't walk around alone here," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "This is not King's Landing. People vanish in this place." She gave a short laugh. "People vanished in King's Landing too." They were quiet for a while. Then she asked what had been clawing at her mind since they arrived. "Do you trust him?" Tyrion didn't answer immediately. He poured himself a cup of dark wine, stared into it, then said, "Roose Bolton doesn't do anything for free. If he's helping us, he wants something. And I don't think it's money." Sansa looked into the fire. "What does he want, then?" Tyrion's voice was low. "He wants power. And you, my lady, are the North." At that moment a knock came. A servant girl, barely older than Sansa, stood trembling in the doorway. "Lord Bolton says he wants to dine with you tomorrow evening, alone." Sansa felt her mouth go dry. Tyrion stood up slowly, his face unreadable. "Thank him, and say she'll come." When the door closed, Sansa whispered, "Why would he want to dine with me alone?" Tyrion gave her a long look. The next evening came with a chill deeper than before. Sansa dressed in silence, her fingers trembling as she pulled the sleeves over her arms. The maid who helped her did not speak, only glanced at her once, quick and pitying, before tightening the laces. The gown was dark blue velvet, far too fine for the cold, but Bolton had sent it with a note. "You'll look like a Stark in this." As if that name still protected her. She descended the stone steps slowly, each one colder than the last. The halls were mostly empty, their torches casting thin shadows that twisted along the walls. The Dreadfort didn't feel alive, it felt haunted, like the stones remembered screams too well. Roose Bolton was waiting at a long table, dressed not in his usual pale tunic, but in heavy black, his leech cloak draped neatly over the back of his chair. The food laid out before him looked untouched. Meat steamed, wine sat ready, yet he waited, still as a statue. When Sansa entered, he stood. "You look well," he said. "Healthier than you did in King's Landing." Sansa offered a nod. "Thank you, my lord." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit, eat, no poison here." That last part was said without irony. He simply stated it as fact, as if she should be grateful. They ate mostly in silence, with only the clink of cutlery breaking the stillness. Sansa tried to mask her unease, but every bite felt like swallowing stones. Roose watched her carefully, too carefully, like he was weighing her value with each blink. Then finally he spoke. "You understand what's coming, don't you?" Sansa set her fork down. "Winter? No war." He poured himself wine. "The North bleeds. The Ironborn took our coasts, wildlings flood the Wall, and the Lannisters, well, they feed on chaos. King's Landing will not stay silent for long once they know where you are." Sansa looked at him steadily. "You plan to give me back?" "If I wanted to, I would have done it already." She didn't answer. Rose leaned forward slightly. "I don't care about your brother's war or Robb Stark's crown. What I care about is order, control. The North needs a strong hand." "A new alliance?" Sansa swallowed hard. "What kind of alliance?" He tilted his head. "The kind where a Stark name is useful again. Your presence in the Dreadfort, it legitimizes my claim. The Warden of the North needs a tie to Winterfell, and you, my lady, are all that remains." Her throat felt dry. "You want to marry me?" "Not me," he replied. "My son." A silence followed so deep she could hear her own breath. A strange ringing echoed in her ears. "You mean Ramsay?" She said the name like a curse. "Yes." Sansa pushed her chair back without realizing it. He's a monster. I've heard stories." "They're all true," Rose interrupted, still calm. "And yet he is loyal and feared. And in this world fear matters more than love." Sansa stood. "I would rather throw myself from these walls." Rose didn't flinch. "You might have given time, but I suggest you reconsider. You have no home, no army, no claim of safety. I'm offering survival. That's more than the world usually gives." She didn't reply. He didn't stop her from leaving. Outside the hall she walked fast, too fast. Her heart pounded in her chest. In the shadows she saw movement. Tyrion emerging from behind a stone pillar, face pale, eyes sharp. "You heard?" she whispered. "Every word," he murmured. "I warned you. What do we do?" Tyrion looked toward the dark ceiling. "You either say yes and try to tame a beast, or you say no and hope Roose Bolton doesn't decide to flay you instead." She stared at him. "I won't let him," he added, voice low. "I'll find a way out." "Give me time," Sansa nodded. But deep inside, she felt something shift, a cold resolve creeping into her bones. Because if Roose Bolton wanted a Stark bride so badly, maybe she could become something else entirely. Not a pawn, not a prisoner, but something much, much darker. Sansa couldn't sleep that night. The Dreadfort was too quiet, an unnatural kind of silence, like the building itself was listening. Every creak of wood, every whisper of wind outside her window felt too deliberate, too rehearsed, like a warning from something old and cruel. She sat on the edge of her bed for hours, wrapped in furs, her eyes fixed on the fire, but her thoughts were far from warm. Rose's offer haunted her, not because it shocked her. Westeros had long since taught her that girls were currency, but because of who he had offered. Ramsay Bolton, the bastard she had only heard whispers about in King's Landing. Even in the capital, where horrors were dressed in silk and crowned with gold, Ramsay's name brought frowns, disappearances, rumors of flayed corpses, madness, hunger for control. Tyrion hadn't spoken to her since that night. He had vanished into the high tower room Rose had assigned him, likely plotting, planning, but Sansa didn't go to him. She didn't want hope tonight. Hope, she had learned, was a dangerous thing. It made you soft, weak, and weakness was blood in the water here. She would survive this, but not by hiding behind others. The next morning, She didn't wait for summons. She went to Roose herself. He was in a small chamber overlooking the snowy courtyard, studying ravens and maps like a man preparing to conquer kingdoms. When she stepped in, he didn't look surprised. "I assume you've considered my offer," he said, still not looking at her. "I have." Now he looked up. "And?" Sansa lifted her chin. "I'll do it." Roose studied her face for several seconds. "Why the change?" "Because you're right. I have no one left, and I'm tired of running." She paused, then added, "If I'm to survive, I need to stop pretending I'm still a girl in a tower." A shadow of something flickered behind Rose's eyes. "Amusement, approval?" She couldn't tell. "You're learning," he said finally. "I'll send word to Ramsay. He's on a hunt." Sansa didn't ask what he was hunting. She already knew the answer wouldn't be animals. Later that day, she finally went to see Tyrion. He was sitting by the fire, reading from a dust-covered book, but he closed it when she walked in. "You've decided," he said flatly. "Yes." He didn't ask what she had chosen. He could see it in her face. "You know what he is." "Yes." "And you'll marry him anyway?" Sansa sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. "I won't marry him because I want to. I'll marry him because I need to. Because the only way to survive a viper's nest is to become one of them." Tyrion exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. "This place is going to eat you alive, Sansa." She gave him a strange look, calm, almost cold. "No, I'm going to eat them." For the first time since they'd escaped King's Landing, Tyrion looked at her like he didn't recognize her. And in truth, she didn't recognize herself either. That soft girl who once dreamed of songs and heroes was gone, buried somewhere between the Red Keep and the Dread Fort. In her place was something harder, colder. Later that night, a servant brought a message to her chamber. "Ramsay returns at sunrise." She stared at the note for a long while. Her fingers gripped the parchment tightly, knuckles white. She didn't know what Ramsay looked like, didn't know the sound of his voice or the color of his eyes. But she had heard enough to build a monster in her mind. And if she was going to be tied to a monster, she had to make sure she didn't become its prey. She went to the glass and looked down at the snowy yard. Soldiers trained with swords. Servants scurried in fear. Dogs barked somewhere in the distance, vicious, angry. Everything in the Dreadfort was sharp, dangerous, even the air. But Sansa Stark had survived the Lannisters. She would survive the Boltons too, even if it meant becoming something else entirely. The sun didn't rise gently at the Dreadfort. It bled over the land in a pale smear, cold and weak, like even the light feared to shine fully on Roose Bolton's domain. Sansa stood at the narrow window of her chamber, eyes locked on the courtyard below as hooves thundered through snow. Ramsay had returned. He rode in at the head of a small group of riders, all wearing leather armor streaked with blood and mud. Behind them 2 dogs snarled, dragged along in chains. And trailing last, 2 flayed bodies, hanging like broken puppets from one of the horses. Sansa felt her stomach twist. The man who dismounted was young, lean, with shaggy dark hair and sharp blue eyes that looked too alive, like a candle flickering too fast before it burst into flame. He moved with the casual grace of someone used to being feared. When a stable boy flinched at his approach, Ramsay grinned and patted the boy's cheek like he was a favored mutt. Then, as if sensing her, Ramsay looked up toward the tower, straight at her window, and smiled. By midday, the introductions had been arranged. Roose summoned Sansa to the main hall, where a fire crackled in the hearth, and the air hung thick with unspoken tension. Ramsay stood beside his father, freshly washed and dressed in fine black wool. But his eyes were still too bright, his smile too wide, like he didn't wear clothes so much as a mask, and underneath that grin was something wild. Sansa entered calmly, spine straight, expression unreadable. Roose didn't waste time. "Lady Sansa, this is my son, Ramsay." "Lord Ramsay, this is Lady Sansa Stark of Winterfell." Ramsay stepped forward. "It's a great honor to meet you, my lady. I've heard so much about you." "I'm sure you have," Sansa replied smoothly, offering a slight curtsy. Ramsay looked delighted. "You're even lovelier than I imagined. I hope you're not too cold in the Dreadfort. It can be a little harsh." "I'm used to harsh," she said quietly. I was married in King's Landing, that made him laugh. A high, amused sound that echoed far too long. I like you already. Sansa didn't respond. She only glanced at Roose, who was watching both of them like a chess master studying his next move. Later, Ramsay offered to show her the grounds. Sansa knew it wasn't really a request. She followed him into the open air, where snow dusted the stones and dogs howled from distant kennels. He talked easily, too easily, as if he truly believed they were just two people getting to know each other. I've never courted anyone before, he admitted, grinning. My last companion. Well, let's just say it didn't end well. What happened to her? Sansa asked. Ramsay tilted his head, pretending to think. She lied to me. And I don't like liars. He stopped walking and turned to face her. You don't lie, do you, Sansa? She looked him dead in the eye. No, I don't have the luxury anymore. For a flicker of a second, Ramsay's smile faltered. Then it returned, sharper than before. I think we'll get along just fine. He led her to the kennels. The dogs snarled and lunged against their cages, teeth flashing. Ramsay knelt beside one, a huge beast with red eyes and a torn ear, and ran his fingers along its snout like it was a lover. This one's name is Bone. Sansa didn't move closer. She's loyal, Ramsay said, not looking at her. But only to me. She'll tear the throat out of anyone else. Isn't that right, girl? The dog growled. Sansa spoke quietly. You're proud of that? Ramsay stood and turned to her, expression unreadable now. I'm proud of loyalty, of obedience. In a world like this, what else is worth anything? Sansa didn't answer. She just looked at the cages, and then at him. I suppose we'll find out. That night, Tyrion found her in the tower. He looked worse, paler, as if the air itself was poisoning him. I saw him, Tyrion said. He's everything they whispered, and worse. I know. You can't marry him. I will, she said flatly. Tyrion stepped forward. Then at least let me get you out. There are ways, hidden roads. Varys taught me a few. No, she said. Why not? She looked at him, and her eyes were colder than the stones around them. Because no one will ever save me again, Tyrion. Not you, not anyone. This time I do the saving, or the destroying, and Tyrion, for once, had no reply. Snow fell through the open courtyard like drifting ash. By now, Sansa had learned that the Dreadfort never truly slept. Even at night, torches hissed, dogs barked, and the walls whispered with the wind. A week had passed since Ramsay's return, and the castle seemed to bend around his moods. Servants moved faster, guards avoided eye contact, and even Roose kept a certain distance from his son. Sansa noticed everything. Ramsay treated her like a plaything he hadn't yet decided how to break. Some mornings he was charming, bringing her small gifts, a fur cloak, a silver comb, bits of attention that would have flattered the girl she used to be. Other days he spoke in riddles about loyalty, obedience, and the price of lies. His smiles never reached his eyes. Once during supper, he told a story about a servant who tried to run away. He laughed as he described how father's men found her and taught her a lesson. The laughter from the table was forced. Everyone knew the story wasn't really about that servant. It was a warning for Sansa. She listened, smiled politely, and never looked away. Tyrion stayed out of sight most days. Rumors spread that he was unwell, drinking heavily, coughing blood. Sansa suspected Roose was keeping him under quiet guard. The little man had become another piece on Bolton's board. That evening, Ramsay invited her to ride with him. She didn't want to, but refusal wasn't an option. The horses were restless. The air bit through her gloves. They rode across the frozen river, silence stretching between them. You're different from the other noble girls, Ramsay said suddenly. Different how? You don't cry, he said with something close to admiration. Most would have by now. Are you afraid of me? Sansa met his gaze.
Should I be?
He laughed. That depends. Fear can be useful. It keeps people honest. The ride ended near an old tower half buried in snow. Ramsay dismounted first, then helped her down, fingers lingering too long on her hand. Inside the tower, a single torch burned, casting long shadows. He circled her slowly, studying her face as if he were reading a riddle. You really are beautiful, he said softly. Almost makes me forget who your family was. Was? she echoed. He smiled. "The Starks are finished, my lady. You're the last one worth keeping." The words hit harder than she wanted them to. For a heartbeat she saw her father, her mother Robb, the family that once meant home, and then she shut the image away. "If I'm the last," she said carefully, "then keeping me alive is in your best interest." Ramsay blinked. Then he laughed, a bright, delighted sound. "Clever. I like clever." When they returned to the hall, Roose was waiting by the fire. His eyes flicked between them. "You'll have the wedding soon," he said. "Before the snow closes the roads." Sansa felt the walls tighten again. That night she found Tyrion pacing his small chamber, a map spread before him. He looked older, his hair unkempt, a half-empty cup at his elbow. "They're planning the ceremony," she told him. He didn't even look up. "I know. Bolton wants the North to see a Stark bride on his banner. What do we do?" she asked. Tyrion finally met her gaze. "You said you wouldn't run. Then we outplay them." He pointed at the map. "Rose has enemies. The Frys despise him. The North remembers the Red Wedding, and Stannis is gathering men at the wall. If we can send word, then they'll march on the Dreadfort," she finished. "And kill everyone in it," Tyrion shrugged. "Including us, perhaps. But chaos can be a ladder, or an escape." She studied him. "You'd risk your life for that?" He gave a tired smile. "I already lost it once when I chose to help you." For a long moment neither spoke. Outside, wolves howled in the distance, a low, mournful sound that trembled through the stones. Sansa whispered, "If we fail, then," Tyrion said quietly, "we make sure we're not the ones begging at the end." She nodded, her jaw tightening. The firelight flickered across her face, carving shadows that looked almost like armor. "I'll play the bride," she said. "I'll smile. I'll kneel if I have to. But when the time comes, Tyrion, I'll make sure they all remember what a Stark looks like when she stops being afraid." Tyrion poured the last of the wine and raised the cup. "Then to fear," he said. "May it choose the right side." Sansa didn't drink. She just watched the fire burn lower, already planning what came next. The wedding was set for the next full moon. Preparations began the same night Roose made the announcement. The servants scurried like shadows, hanging blood-red banners, polishing dark steel, lighting fires in rooms long frozen shut. Everything at the Dreadfort seemed to be done quietly, without joy. Not even the kitchen boys dared speak above whispers. Sansa sat in her chamber, watching the snow fall, while the same maid brushed her hair each morning. The girl never said a word, just braided, pinned, and left. Her hands shook every time she touched Sansa's shoulders. It didn't take much to guess why. Everyone in the castle knew Ramsay. Sansa, though, didn't flinch anymore. There was no one left to hide behind now. She had no wolves, no guards, no mother, no brothers. Just her, a knife beneath her sleeve, and Tyrion buried somewhere in the tower, risking his life to send ravens into the snow. She waited until the fourth night before slipping into his chamber again. He looked worse. His cough had deepened, and there were dark rings under his eyes. The window had been bricked up, one stone at a time, and the air smelled of damp wine and desperation. "I sent the raven," Tyrion said before she could speak. "To Castle Black. It may not reach them." Sansa nodded. "Stannis is at the wall." "He was, last we heard." "If he's still there," she said softly, "he might come." Tyrion laughed, then coughed. "You'd trust another king with your life?" She tilted her head. "I don't trust anyone. But if he wants the North, I can offer him something Bolton can't." Tyrion raised a brow. "You mean yourself?" "No," she said coldly. "I mean legitimacy, a name. Stark blood." Tyrion looked at her for a long moment. "You're not the girl I married in King's Landing. I'm not even the girl who escaped it." That night a message arrived from Roose himself. "You will wear the white dress. You will say the vows. You will kneel before the gods and be his lady. You belong to the North." Sansa burned the note in her fireplace and watched the words curl into smoke. The day of the wedding came with bitter wind. Sansa was dressed in a white gown stitched with grey fur along the collar, Bolton colours lined over Stark bones. Her hair was braided in the northern style, her lips painted pale, her hands trembling just once before the doors opened. The ceremony was held in the old godswood, where snow blanketed the trees, and the heart tree bled crimson tears from its face. No music, no laughter, only the silence of the old gods watching from their carved bark, as Ramsay stood waiting in black leather and a wolf-toothed dagger at his belt. Roose officiated. "The North remembers," he said, voice cutting the wind like ice. "And today the North is reborn." Sansa stepped forward with the grace of a queen, her eyes fixed ahead, her heart locked behind ribs that felt like iron bars. Ramsay took her hand. "You look like a dream," he whispered. "I'm not," she replied. "I'm the ending of one?" The words meant nothing to him, of course. Not yet, they said the vows. Ramsay forced a kiss in front of the godswood, gripping her too tightly, his teeth grazing her lip as he pulled back. She didn't react. She just looked past him, at the blood on the snow beneath the tree. Later they feasted in the hall. It was not a celebration. Roose watched from the head of the table, drinking slowly, reading every movement between them, like a man studying a beast he'd barely tamed. Sansa played her part. She smiled. She accepted toasts. She let Ramsay place his hand on her thigh under the table without flinching. But she also counted every guard, every door. Every time someone left the hall. Tyrion wasn't at the feast. That worried her. By nightfall she was led to the bridal chamber, an old room near the tower, heavy with dust and history. The fire roared, the bed was draped in red, and Ramsay was already there, unfastening his boots, his face full of hunger. Sansa stepped inside and closed the door behind her. He smiled. "So now we're one." She walked toward him slowly. "Yes," she said. "We are." He reached for her, but she stopped him with a single hand pressed to his chest. "Before we begin," she said calmly, "I want to tell you a secret." Ramsay's grin widened. "Oh, I love secrets." Sansa leaned closer, her voice barely a breath. "I am not the prey here." Then she smiled. And in that moment, even Ramsay Bolton forgot to laugh. Ramsay tilted his head. The words, "I am not the prey here," hung between them like mist in the cold air. For a heartbeat he said nothing. Then his lips curled into a half-smile, less amused now, more curious. "You have claws, Lady Stark," he whispered. Sansa's expression didn't change. She stood still, eyes locked on him, her hand still lightly pressed against his chest. "I have what I need," she said softly. "And what's that?" he asked, stepping back to remove his tunic. "Courage, revenge? A knife hidden in your wedding dress?" Sansa didn't respond. She didn't have to. Because the knife wasn't under her dress. It was in her voice, in her stillness, in the way she looked at him, not with fear, but calculation. That unsettled Ramsay more than a blade ever could. He stepped forward again, reaching for her face, but she slipped past him, walking slowly around the room, fingers grazing the furniture like she owned it already. "I've heard all the stories," she said, not looking at him, "about the girls, the ones who screamed, the ones who begged. You enjoy fear. Fear is honest," Ramsay replied. "No," Sansa said, turning back to him. "It's simple. That's why you like it. You don't know what to do with someone who won't scream." Ramsay's smile faltered. "You think you can break me?" she asked. "You think I'm another toy?" "I was raised by wolves, Ramsay. I've lived with lions. I know how monsters think." He took a slow step toward her. "Then you know they always eat first." Sansa didn't move. "Not if someone poisons the meat." Silence. A flicker of something passed across Ramsay's face. His jaw tightened. The fire cracked loudly behind him. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then went silent. "You're bluffing," he said. "Maybe," she replied. "Or maybe you've already swallowed it." He stared at her, eyes narrowed. His hands trembled slightly. "You're lying. Check your cup." He didn't move. "I've seen you drink wine all night," she continued. 3 goblets. You always drink just enough to enjoy the fear, but not lose control." Ramsay glanced toward the flagon near the bed. "I didn't touch it," she said. "Tyrion did." That got him. Ramsay turned and lunged for the goblet, sniffing it, then flinging it against the wall. The metal clanged against stone, wine spraying like blood across the cold grey. He turned back to her, eyes wild now. "If I die, so do you." Sansa took a single step forward. "I'd rather die fighting than live as your wife." Ramsay snarled and moved faster than she expected. He crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbing her wrist and slamming her against the wall. The breath punched from her lungs, and pain blossomed down her back. But she didn't scream. He gripped her neck, hard. "I should gut you," he hissed. "Right now." Her voice rasped out past his hand. "Then do it." He stared at her. "Do it," she repeated. "Kill your Stark bride. Ruin your father's plans. Lose the North. Let them all know you couldn't tame one little girl." Ramsay's hand shook. He released her suddenly, stumbling back, chest heaving. Sweat glistened on his forehead. He wiped his mouth, lips curling in disgust, though it wasn't clear if he was disgusted by her or himself. "You think you're clever," he said. "I know I am." They stood there staring. Then Ramsay laughed. A single sharp bark. "Not joy, madness." "Oh, we're going to have so much fun," he muttered. Sansa adjusted her dress, heart pounding, throat bruised but unbroken. "You'll regret this," he said, pointing at her. "You and your little Lannister pet. You think you're safe." "No," she said simply. "But I'm not caged either." She turned and left the room without permission, without fear, and without a scratch more than she already carried. She found Tyrion near the kitchens, pale and slumped against a wall, blood at the corner of his mouth. "It worked," she said. He didn't smile. "He didn't die, though, did he?" "No," she said. "But he saw the wolf's teeth." Tyrion winced. "We won't get another chance like that." "I don't need another chance," she whispered. "I just need him to believe I'm capable. And Roose." Sansa looked down the corridor, where cold wind howled and silence stretched thick around them. "He's next." Snow came heavier the next morning, thick enough to hide the footprints in the yard. From the high tower window, the world looked clean again, white and silent, as if nothing had ever happened the night before. Sansa knew better. Word of her confrontation with Ramsay must have reached his father. Roose's men watched her now, standing like stone outside her door. She moved through her rooms calmly, never rushing, never showing a tremor. Fear was a language she no longer spoke. When she entered the hall, Roose was waiting alone. Ramsay was gone, off to hunt, someone had whispered. The older man gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit, Lady Bolton," he said. She sat. The title stung, but she didn't correct him. He studied her the way a hawk studies a mouse that might not be dead. "My son is unsettled. You have a talent for provoking people. I learned from the best," she said evenly. Roose's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "You think you understand us? You and your clever little husband hiding in my tower, sending ravens like ghosts in the night. I could have you both flayed before supper." Sansa folded her hands. "Then why haven't you?" He paused, just a moment too long. "Because you might still be useful." "Because you need the Stark name," she corrected softly. "You need the people of the North to believe a Stark stands beside you. Otherwise, you're just another man who murdered his king." Roose's eyes narrowed. "Careful, girl." "No," she said, voice calm, almost gentle. "You should be careful. You killed my brother. You slaughtered his men at a feast. You wear honor like a mask. But masks break." For the first time, she saw a spark of anger behind that still face. "Tell me, Lord Bolton," she whispered, leaning forward. "What happens when the North learns that you tried to wed their last Stark to your bastard and failed?" Roose opened his mouth, but a sound from outside cut him short. A horn, distant but clear. Then another. A second later, a guard burst into the hall, breath clouding in the air. "Riders from the wall. They bear Stannis Baratheon's banners." The Lord's expression barely moved, yet his fingers tightened on the table. "So the old lion's pet did reach them," he murmured. "Sansa rose. You'll need to choose quickly, my lord. Bend the knee to Stannis and keep your title, or fight and lose everything." He stood too, face smooth again. "And what would you have me do, little wolf?" "I would have you remember what you did to my family," she said. "And then pray the gods forget." She turned and walked out before he could answer. Outside, the castle was chaos. Horns kept sounding from the walls. Men shouted orders, dragging carts, closing gates. The sky was the color of iron. Tyrion limped toward her through the snow, clutching a pack and coughing. "They're close," he rasped. "Half a day, maybe less. Roose will try to parley, but his men are terrified. The North hates him." "Good," Sansa said. "That makes them ours." He blinked. "Ours?" She pointed toward the old tower. You said chaos is a ladder. Let's climb it. They moved quickly, down corridors, through the kitchens, out into the courtyard where Ramsay's dogs howled behind locked gates. She opened each cage herself. The beasts smelled blood in the air and thundered away into the storm. By nightfall, the first of Stannis' scouts reached the Dreadfort. Torches glowed on the horizon like a second sunrise. Inside, Roose Bolton stood at his ramparts wrapped in furs, watching his world burn down through the snow. Sansa watched too from the courtyard below. For a moment their eyes met across the falling white. No words, no triumph, only the quiet understanding that the game had turned. When the outer gates burst and the shouts of battle filled the yard, Tyrion caught her arm. "We need to move." "Go," she said. "You'll find a way out. What about you?" She looked up at the towers of the Dreadfort, at the banners snapping in the wind. "Someone has to make sure the flayed man falls for good." He wanted to argue, but there was no time. He vanished into the smoke and snow. Sansa climbed the steps to the ramparts. Roose was still there, staring at the fires consuming his walls. He turned as she approached, the faintest trace of regret in his eyes. "You brought the storm here," he said. "No," she answered. "You built it." The wind howled between them, carrying the sounds of men dying below. Roose drew his dagger slowly. "You'll freeze out here, my lady." Sansa didn't step back. Winter never scared a Stark. For a moment neither moved. Then another horn sounded, louder, closer, and the Dreadfort shook as the gates broke. Roose turned toward the noise. Sansa slipped away into the blinding snow, the red banners tearing loose above her head. By dawn the Boltons were gone. The Dreadfort smoked behind her, its stones blackened, its sigil torn down. Tyrion found her on the ridge, half frozen, staring north toward Winterfell. "It's over," he said quietly. Sansa shook her head. "No, this is just what comes after." He offered her his cloak. She took it, eyes still on the horizon. Somewhere beyond the snow, the old gods watched in silence. The girl who once dreamed of songs was gone. The woman who remained walked away from the ashes without looking back, and in the frozen wind that followed, the north whispered her name. Sansa Stark. Not the prey, not the bride, the survivor.